Left the snow tires.
Somebody asking for the phone number to join.
Got back and there was a snow. It was yesterday. Yes. The house if we did. So I go, okay, Dan, you're forgiven.
Okay, it's 8:31. We can go ahead and get started and call the Utility Policy Committee meeting for April 10th, 2025 to order. The next item is to set the agenda. And we do have an addition. Let me make sure my. Under new business, we can add an item E, which is consideration of the revisions to Appendix D, the Water Services Agreement for the fees. Annual review was conducted. And that information was sent out yesterday. And then, David, you wanted to talk about compensation.
Yeah, some sort of stipend for people who are not otherwise compensated.
That'd be F.
Are you good to do that with under invoices?
Sure, wherever.
Because that's where we
Sure,
deal with
that's fine.
compensation. Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Support.
There's a motion by John Crum and a second by Tom Wheat to accept the agenda with the one amendment. I'll add item E. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next is introductions and guests. We have some new people. Why don't we just quickly go through our board and then we'll go through the audience as well.
David Anderson, City of Kalamazoo.
Jeff Chamberlain, representing the City of Kalamazoo.
Libby Heine Cogswell, Regional Commission.
Tom Lee from Prime Newhoff representing the townships.
John Crum, Gull Lake Sewer and Water Authority. Peter Hefner, representing the Regional Commission.
James Baker, City Kalamazoo. I'm a staff member, not board member.
Eric Priest, Richland Township.
Jeff Sorensen, Cooper Township, and Regional Commission.
Mark Elliott, Township Alternate, former Director of Public Works, Oshtemo.
Anna Crandall, City of Kalamazoo.
Mark DeClerc, Applied Asset Management Consultants and Citizen Ratepayer from Kalamazoo.
Jerry Vanders, Charleston Township.
Emily Meidel, Texas Township.
And then online, we have a number of guests. Supervisor Hutchings, Ms. Katz from the rate consultant, Ellen Lang, Joey Murphy, Melissa Fuller, and Melissa Fuller. Welcome, everyone. Next is acceptance of the February 13th, 2025 draft minutes. Any changes or corrections?
I would make a motion to approve the minutes from our prior meeting.
Support.
There's a motion by Peter Hafner, second by David Anderson to accept the minutes of the meeting from February 13th, 2025. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is item 5, public comment. Is there anyone wishing to speak this morning? Anyone online? Don't see any raised hands there either. So we will proceed to unfinished business, and the next item is the neighborhood policy amendments. And Tom, would you like to introduce this?
Yeah, we've been talking about this for a while. There's a markup in the packet.
Followed by a clean version.
For the clean version. So this has gone back to the regional commission, and the regional commission, the consensus was this is a reasonable policy. Again, the policy is to help neighborhoods extend water main in the neighborhood with help from the system, so that the people in the neighborhood would be paying approximately 30% of the cost of the pipe. The system pays for the rest, but the caveat is that the people in the neighborhood would have to consent to, and the township would have to adopt an ordinance that would require mandatory connection when their well fails. So I think everybody's on board. There are two Peter had some very minor changes in here. They are, water extension policy, the sort of the brighter blue. But you've seen these changes from before. Two changes I'm gonna suggest for today are that we're gonna be, this policy shows a 77,000 to be in accordance with a recommendation for Appendix D. It's 7350, right, James?
I believe that's correct.
And that's just reflecting the
Yes, yes, that's correct.
the cost of inflation, because we've been talking about this for a year. And the cost of pipe has gone up. And just from seeing the market, we've seen it gone up a little bit, but the crazy inflation of the past few years, we haven't seen that on the water side. And we verified that with some water main projects that we've done recently. The only other change is that for the UPC use on the second page, it's just sort of the order of events. And my suggestion is that after item number 3, so that is just setting forth the steps. Number 1, township requests a project to the UPC along with cost estimate and a township board resolution to a mandatory connection. UPC says, yep, that's a good idea, number 2. Number 3, properties within the neighborhood then do a petition. Well, they know the cost, they know they have to connect to, have the mandatory connection. Then I'm gonna suggest that the township then does the mandatory ordinance. So we don't go through the process of getting a project going and then have a board change their mind or a board change because of elections. And then I think the UPC should know that the residents are on board and the township is on board before we move forward in making it a project.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
You mentioned in the first bullet point where you say for a well upgrade, I think that's kind of ambiguous. I would say if as you mentioned, well fails, somebody down the road can take an upgrade, it's just upgrading it with a new pump or a point. Just a thought, I'm just trying to save it, we all understand it, but.
Yep. But it does say a permit required for a well upgrade.
Okay, all
So
right.
I think that's clear
Okay.
enough that it's tying it to a permit,
Gotcha.
so.
So would you suggest between 3 and 4, we put something like township provides documentation of mandatory connection for?
Yeah, the township provides documentation of adoption of mandatory connection ordinance. And I think those 2 minor changes are close enough that we could adopt this as our policy today. And unless, I'll make a motion so that we can go to discussion. I'll make a motion to amend this policy with those two changes, 7350, which will change year by year in Appendix D, and in the step that adds the adoption of the mandatory ordinance by the township.
And I would second that motion.
And discussion on this item?
I just have one question here, just a clarifying thing. I know we had talked about and it's in here, about the residents having a petition showing at least 50% or more are in favor of this. So just to clarify, does that mean that 50% will get hooked up when the project is started? Or would they then fall under when the permit for a well fails scenario?
Yeah.
So just to clarify, so we could still have a situation where the water line goes in because 50% have approved it, the township has done everything. We put the water line in, but then we still may only have a couple connections to begin with?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, it's a long-term investment in customers, I guess.
Okay.
Long-term investment of providing municipal water.
Thanks, just want
Yeah.
to clarify that.
Guess there's a motion on the floor. It's been,
Is there support for this as,
Yep.
I mean, is there any other discussion? Does adding that item number 4 and changing the other numbers make sense to everyone?
And again, the 7350, but it's referenced to Appendix D, so that will change time to time with D. In case this document gets stale, it still takes us to Appendix D.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6A2 is the capital improvement plan, the 2025 projects overview. And that up on the screen. And James, provide this overview for us today.
Sure, thanks, Libby. Just to go through, we're looking at projects in 2025, and we just want to provide a brief overview of, what are some of the things we're working on. And I'll just kind of go through that now. So if you start at the top, we've got water source and pumping, that's kind of our station projects. This year, we've got a lot of focus on wells, so we're gonna be doing a lot of well replacement, well rehabs. Some of that work will likely carry on in the next year. We also have our big project at Station 5 and Station 14. That's a consolidation project that's funded through DWSRF. That's in the design phase right now, and that's just gonna move rather swiftly from design into implementation, into construction, and that project will also carry out for several years. You see about 51 million in 2025. That actual cash flow or that spend rate is gonna go through all the way through 2029 before that station becomes operational. So that those dollars are gonna kind of smooth out in terms of how they're expensed into the future.
Question on that one, James.
Yeah.
On that consolidation, so that's gonna, can you just describe it a little bit, like it's gonna take this one out of service, or how does that work? And is there some PFAS remediation in there too?
Sure, yeah, that's one of the reasons why the project has got such the high price tag on it. So, existing, we have Station 5 and Station 14. Both of those are located within what we call our intermediate pressure district, which is, in the area kind of broadly on the east side of Kalamazoo, including East Side neighborhood and into Kalamazoo Township's East Wood neighborhood. So it's, borders city township in that area. Those two stations are kind of separate aquifers. They both have separate water capture zones, so they're not related at all. We are following a plan as we make major investments into stations. We're looking at where we can consolidate stations. So going back, into the history of the development of our water system, we had several small stations, many of these stations spread out all throughout the county. That was a model that the system employed. It sought to seek reliability through redundancy. As we've grown, we need every single one of those stations to work. So our concept of reliability through redundancy is kind of lost because there's no redundancy, they all have to work. So there's also been some regulatory changes in terms of water quality and the variability in water quality between different stations. So think of it like, we're making Kool-Aid. My mom makes Kool-Aid perhaps different than your mom, and their flavor might be somewhat different. So we're trying to kind of dial that in, so to speak, and have more consistent water quality across the entire region. And we can really only do that if we reduce the number of stations. So we're consolidating stations, like 2 stations becomes 1. We've got some future projects with Central that we'll talk about that are, gonna be like 3 stations become 1. So we're working to kind of reduce the overall number of stations in the system. So that's why you see 5 and 14 consolidation. In addition to that, Station 5 has a known PFAS contamination site about 1,000 feet away from it. The station itself is not contaminated. We haven't pulled that in. We're still under Michigan MCLs, but that's a risk. And so that's a risk, and we have not been able to use that station under its full hydraulic capacity in terms of just getting it on, turning it on, and leaving it on like a baseload station. Station 14 doesn't have any contamination plume nearby, but it is picking up background PFAS numbers currently below Michigan MCL, but something that we want to make sure we're protecting into the future. So if we're going to make the investment into these stations, and for some perspective, Station 5 was built in 1914. So that station's 111 years old, and that's to give you some insight of how long we run these stations. So PFAS is a relatively new contaminant of concern, it's an emerging contaminant concern. And so when we build this new station, we want to make sure we've got the most up-to-date treatment. So it's going to have iron treatment and removal. It's going to have manganese treatment and removal. It's going to have PFAS treatment and removal, all at one consolidated station. And then when it goes online, it's going to base load, meaning it's going to run 24/7. And if it's making more water than what that intermediate system needs, it's going to boost it up to the next available district. So we're going to actually make some pretty good water there and then push that out to other districts as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Moving down the list, Station 25, we're doing a lot of work out there at Station 25, mainly focused on electrical, getting a new generator that's big enough to run the whole station, and then with that, we're also replacing all the mechanicals with it. There's some smaller buckets, I'm not gonna go into all the details on that. A lot of it is, as you zoom out, it really just focuses on continuing to increase reliability of these stations. We don't have the ability, like we did, say, 25 years ago, just to turn a station off because it doesn't work and run a different station. Our demand now requires we run all stations. And there's, like I said earlier, there's also regulatory aspects of that in terms of things just have to work. The years of, having things not work are kind of beyond us in terms of, there's a regulatory requirement for that. Moving down the list, getting into, the big water main projects. If we've got a project we're coordinating with MDOT on West Main, so there's gonna be a 12-inch going on West Main that replaces a section of 10-inch that previously served as a transmission main, will now be 12-inch. There's several smaller projects within the city, replacing some water main on some streets and alleys and things. We also have Two relatively important loops happening out in Comstock Township. So we're gonna have the ML 35th Street Loop, and then next year, we're gonna pick up with the NAV to 34th to 35th Street Loop. So there's a lot of growth happening in Comstock Township, kind of in Pavilion along NAV. That growth is continuing kind of what we call eastward. And so we also have major housing developments in Comstock Township that are relatively new, speaking from the last 10 or 15 years. And so we're kind of tying together a few endpoints that are out on that kind of eastern edge of our service district, just to increase reliability, give us some better hydraulics and some increased ability to move water around and boost water within those areas. We also have the big Richland Township project, that's extending water main. That's also working very quickly through design. We've got 2 easements for that project that are going before City Commission on the next meeting in April. Those are pretty critical easements that help us kind of loop back Richland on itself. The system kind of ends at the township line of Richland and then comes back. Continuing down, I'm on page 3 now. We've got big lead service projects kicking off in our Edison neighborhood. We'll be there all through this year and then into next year for a little bit. And then, we've kind of summarized, some water general capital. Those are, like I would say, general plan type items and that nature. And then all the accounts are kind of summarized, including our CIA there. So that's a overall snapshot. I'll also know, Peter, you might see some big projects coming up to where there's like a 3-year arc of funding. That might kick off some of our design engineering, some planning. There's a few line items on here that talk about central. That's all kind of feeding into a central consolidation project. And we are starting some property acquisition related to that project. So the property acquisition design, some of that stuff's gonna start on central, but the actual project is a few years out yet.
Just so when we have these discussions, is it possible to get maybe 11 by 17 map so that we know where Station 25 is?
Sure.
Or where Station 11 is? And maybe even put it like the 10-year time of travel capture zone?
We have the best product for that's probably GIS, because we can almost like sit here and turn that all on. The challenge with giving you a picture of that, we're so zoomed out to fit it that it's hard to see everything, but we can work on a few different snapshots, really just get in GIS, turn in some layers on and showing you some different viewports of it. So that's very easy ask for us to put together.
It'd just be helpful, because I know where all the stations are, I just have no idea what number they are. So,
As part of that, James, you had noted that there were a lot of breaks. Is there any update on that, or do you talk about it a little later, or?
Yeah, I can give an update on that. I mean, it's not called out on the agenda per se. We had almost a influx of record main breaks in a short duration of time, followed, given last year, relatively low number of main breaks. So that's starting to slow down now. We did take some specific action to prioritize that work. We took a contract to City Commission to seek approval for road repairs so that we could have crews focus on, really going main break to main break to main break to get water restored to customers. And then we have a separate outside contractual contractors coming around behind that group to do the road repairs. So those road repairs are right now in process. That work's happening right now, and we still are getting main breaks. I think we had 1 or 2 yesterday, but it's slowing down from what it was. And so we don't have final numbers on it, because we're
Should that tail off like now, is that all about like the frost heave? or-
Yeah, it's really all about soil movement.
Yep.
And cast iron pipe that has, some brittleness and some corrosion to it, just doesn't have the strength characteristics or the ductility, the flexibility to handle when those soils move around a little bit. So it just starts creating, successive main breaks, and we've really have focused our cast iron pipe replacement schedules around some of this work. We know the overall age and material types to go after. We trend all the main breaks, we've got layers in GIS, so we're looking at them. And when we do major streets like White's Road and Westage, and Ransom, those are big projects we did last year. There's a reason why we replaced that main in those streets. That main in those streets did have significant break history, so that the good news is those sections of Westage and White's Road didn't have any main breaks this year. So we're trying to really take an asset management type approach to deliver complete projects that are gonna serve the community for decades in the future without us having to come right back in and open everything back up again.
Is there, I think maybe we discussed this, but isn't there it's just not just cast iron, but it's sort of post-World War II cast iron?
Correct, yeah, it's actually cast iron, broadly in the range of, 1940, give or take, up through, the late 1950s, up to early 1960s. We see that material manufactured during that time was a little bit thinner compared to some of our older cast iron, and also for whatever reason appears to be more susceptible to corrosion. So we looked at pipes in the ground from, that post-war era, 1946, 47, 1950, and we're seeing them corrode compared to pipes from 1920, 1930 that aren't corroding and in the same soil. So we also see the pipe is quite a bit thinner. So I think it's just, certainly there was a lot of demand during that time period, and there was some change in quality in that period in time. Now, once we hit 1964, the city had switched over to all ductile iron pipe. And so our ductile iron pipe has really good break history in terms of outside of some traffic crashes where folks are hitting hydrants and that's causing the main to break. We don't have, any documented breaks of that nature. So we're still seeing excellent service life from ductile. Not so great service life from late period cast iron.
Well, James, I know you kind of went through a lot of projects, but it always still just is a really wide, eye-opening reminder of looking at about $511 million worth of work over the next 5 years. And I don't know if that's completely unprecedented, but if not, it probably is close to being unprecedented. But to your point, just so much of the infrastructure is aging, a lot of it being underground, but still, that's just it's an amazing investment into the water system, not just in the city, obviously, but everywhere. Good luck with that, Anna.
Thanks.
Just since we're in this, I just have a few questions related to this. Just out of curiosity, the equipment, the pipe and parts that we install, is much of that imported?
So most of that work that we do, stations, pipe, all that kind of stuff, is what we call BABA, Buy America, Buy American. All the funding, so like DWSRF funding, that requires American iron and steel. So most of what we're buying, now there are some exemptions, some like controls and some of the things going in the cabinets, some of that stuff is globally sourced, but the overwhelming majority of the stuff that we do, the materials that we have
here.
are manufactured, here in America.
Yeah.
And so we are watching, there is some recent things happening in the economy and with the federal government that are, creating some instability. We've been reaching out to our vendors and manufacturers and trying to get an understanding of where things are gonna go. It might be a little too early to fully understand everything yet, so, we are setting up some meetings. We've got some meetings with our, major pipe supplier in about 2 weeks out from now. And then we're also scheduling a major equipment manufacturer meeting about 4 to 6 weeks out from now. We're trying to get, trying to understand where the market's going and then, try to get that trend line to develop a little bit. And then sit down with these folks and try to understand, where we're going. I think certain prices certainly are a concern. I think equally to that is lead times. If you remember a few years ago, water main availability became very scarce. And we had to, the city commission actually authorized advanced purchase of water main to where, I can't remember the exact number, something around $12 million of water main that we bought and then waited a year and then received. That was part of the reason why White's and Westridge Road had to happen at the same time, because those projects didn't have water main to start. And so we had to order the water main, and on those projects, when we ordered the water main, you started the project clock because you spent money on the project. And so then that triggered the drop dead date, which was, the end of 2024, projects had to get done. So we're trying to get ahead of something like that, or to have that knowledge early. Certainly, we don't like to deal with price increases, but scarcity and long lead times can create just as many headaches with project delivery as does cost increases.
On the redundancy piece, is that a best practice to have some redundancy? And are we becoming in a riskier situation where we don't have that anymore?
It's a redefining where the redundancy exists. So you see, we're spending a lot of money with generators. We're spending a lot of money with station improvements. So instead of having, say, 16 stations and only 6 of them have generators, we're gonna have, say, long-term, 10 stations with 10 generators. So the old model that Kalamazoo utilized was, well, you've got more stations than you need. If something happens, just use another station. And so we're following a more industry-accepted model where you need every station, and so every station's gonna have the things you need. It's gonna have a generator, it's gonna have more than one pump, it's gonna have redundant controls, and so that's what we're building into these stations now. I mean, if you compare some of the biggest systems in our state or, across America, many of them might have 1 or 2 or 3 treatment plants. I don't know the exact number, but I think Detroit only has 2 or 3 water plants. And so those water plants have to work, right? And so they make sure they work with redundancy of the plant itself. So our model was really unique at the time. And it was favored at the time because of our vast area that we covered. And you could build a station relatively inexpensively if you didn't have to have all the redundancy, because we had all the stations. And so because of regulatory challenges, change in landscape, so to speak, and then, just the overall growth of the system, we now need all the stations to work.
Hey, back to that question about, water main breaks. So we talk about all the divestment we're doing in our system, and that certainly comes up when it's time for rates to be
Sure.
increased. We
Sure.
talk about that. And then we have a year where we have more main breaks than maybe we've had recently. How do we align those things? Well, hey, we're fixing it, we're spending money to fix it, and yet, we've still got more breaks going on. Is that, how do we lay those things against each
Yeah,
other?
well, and I think, no, I don't think anybody knew that, hey, that water main you're putting in and around World War II and in that post-war growth period, maybe it's more susceptible to corrosion than some of the other main. Nobody would have known that, right? And so we're reacting to our experiences as a system, and we're applying our best practices of asset management, to that work. So we've got a high number of main breaks now, and we've got some trends. We show you those trends over 20-year period there in our annual report. And so you can kind of see where that's come out. And that's giving us that's sending a message, that's providing justification to the system to say, let's start investing in water main replacement, because this is becoming a problem. And it's becoming a problem because when we're going through what we just went through in January and February, we're having 2 and 3 breaks a day. We've had, I think reported out around February 20th, we had more main breaks than there were days in the year so far. And so when we're in that kind of scenario, we start really to be short on staffing. And so that's really a capacity issue. When we don't have the staff to keep up with the main breaks, that should tell you something. That tells us that we need to be replacing main, we need to be proactive and start to get ahead of this. Now, it's gonna be a long road. We're not out of the woods because we do 1 or 2 street projects. We've got about 300 miles of cast iron pipe, and about 150 of that miles that are, in this age range that we're talking about. If we put that to the pricing that we've been seeing lately for Maine, it's about $300 million of work that has to happen. That's, future work. So we know we've got to do it every year. And the capital improvement program has individual streets named, and then it starts, after you run out of names, it starts to just show buckets, and we fill those names in as we go. So we know we've got to do the work. I think experiencing those main breaks is really that justification. We're, at the ground level, seeing the need, and we've got to continue the program. So above all else, I would say it's certainly unfortunate that we're experiencing that, but it really is that justification. We've got to continue this work.
Yeah. Does that create some internal challenges, though, in terms of budgeting? Because on one hand, we just talked about possibly adding water main into a neighborhood where literally everybody says, yeah, someday I want it, but I'm not gonna hook up now. So it could literally be, hundreds of thousands of feet of new water main, when there's really no direct need. You've got that expense, and then on the other side, you've got 150 miles of actual existing water main that is, everybody's using, that's adjacent to it, and it's the whole core, the heart of kind of the distribution system. How do we align those?
Sure, it's always a balancing act. I mean, we've got, if you look at it, the overall capital program, we've got, water quality, station improvement, station reliability. We can kind of all put that in a bucket. We've got cast iron main replacement, lead service replacement. This is kind of like replacement of your older infrastructure from your linear assets aspect. You can kind of put that all in a bucket. And we still have growth. We need to support growth as a utility. Those new customers, new paying customers, to help build our utility and grow our utility as we go into the future. So there's always that need for that. Transmission main it straddles kind of both scenarios. It supports growth, and it also increases reliability and resiliency. So that's kind of best of both worlds. So, when we build that capital program, we're kind of trying to provide a little bit of everything to everybody. We serve a very unique system in that we've got some parts of our system have literally been here since 1867, and some of them we just connected yesterday. And we've got to serve both customers in a fair and equitable way to kind of, manage that system. And so, the capital program is pretty diverse in terms of it's trying to hit all those areas and overall build the reliability of the system to a better place, year after year after year.
And in terms of development, there is some planning projection there in terms of, what's zoned for development and where things are happening, because you don't want the 100-home neighborhood to develop and everybody put an individual well.
Right.
So you have to, it is a balancing act. thinking of the retrofit in Oshtemo and sewer, and that is so hard. Much harder than getting it in. Anything else, any other questions? Thank you. The next item under new business is the billing system audit and processes review. And my understanding is the city is developing an RFP to get some information on that, and this is another item that, James, you could provide the overview for us.
Sure, the city's working right now, we're working with our management services department to put together an RFP for a water and wastewater commercial office and billing audit. So this is a little bit different from what we do when we do rate studies and things like that. When we do rate studies, we're really looking at all the financial information and usage information that we kind of get through the front door and we compile, we give to the rate makers. This is going a little step beyond that. We're really gonna look at and perform kind of a detailed audit of billing, customer accounts, meters, hydrants, looking at residential, commercial, institutional, industrial, irrigation accounts, trying to identify where we got discrepancies and, make some positive recommendations for workflow, policy and process to support, accuracy and improvement. So we've got roughly 46,000 accounts out there. And, we've discovered internally that, sometimes we can't figure out exact matches between like service lines and meters. And there's some reasons to that. There's some locations that have, one service line but 3 or 4 meters. So we really like to take some deep dives to make sure, hey, those 3 or 4 meters are linked to sewer, not just one of them. So we've gone through some exercises internally, just some litmus test on, looking at some developments, looking at some new customers, some old customers, and we've found some discrepancies where we found customers that had several meters, like industrial customers, and one of them's linked to wastewater, but 2 of them are only water, but they're used and they go down the drain. So that's a concern for us. We've also, from a process standpoint, how we read the meters, bring that information in to our billing system, and then how that goes out. We'd like to really investigate that and, make some improvements there. We've got many different service categories. If you're a institution, you get a different rate than if you're residential. And so we want to make sure that's all accurate. On the wastewater side, we have a type of customer called a flat rate customer. So this is a customer that is a sewer only customer, does not have city water, so they don't have a water meter. And it's just a matter of counting customers. And so we've had areas where we've got flat rate customers in one municipality that's coming across the border, there's a meter, and then we're giving credits back for a number of flat rate customers. And we've got to almost go out and hand count those customers to ensure accuracy. It's been a few years since we've looked at that. So really it's just a deep dive into all that whole process. And we've got a great team that's really takes this stuff very seriously, that's working through several different software systems to make it all work. We want to support them and give them the tools they need to make sure we've got full accountability on everything, and then really to look at process and workflow to see, hey, is there a way that we could clean some of this up? Can we automate some of this? Can we make this easier for some folks? And then, we've got the smart meters coming in. That's the other big aspect of it too. And I think we'd like to look at some areas where we're gonna make some change. One of those is gonna be Richland. We're gonna be working with Richland Township, Richland Village, and Go Lake Sewer and Water. So that's gonna kind of create, it should create a good test bed for us to be able to look at, this is what we were metering before. this is what we're metering after, and should give us some real good numbers. Stantec's also kind of stepping up their team a little bit. We've talked to some experts at Stantec who are experts in metering and billing accuracy that have got some tools for us from the AWWA, American Waterworks Association, that can help with this. But bringing them in at the right time, we've got to get through some of this, billing accuracy and some of this audit stuff to really work well with them. So we'll be bidding this out or requesting proposals for this probably within the next 30 to 60 days. And then once we get those packets back, we do plan to reach out to, Prine and Newhoff, Stantec, the Foster Group, the Hafner Group, that Peter Hafner's group, and request some additional support. So we're gonna really try to kind of build a team around this, and then workflow from like a peer review of what the auditors are finding, and then also really build that and build back those processes and workflow to say, hey, how can we use GIS to help locate where we should have customers? If we've got sewer in the ground, we've got water in the ground, we should almost be able to turn that on to GIS and light up a square if we don't have a customer, something like that. So using technology and applying technology to improve accuracy and improve workflow as well.
Just a suggestion on the sewer side of that, because you're doing sewer and water.
Correct, yep.
So recently, Texas Township did a mandatory connection ordinance, and I think are very up to date on who is connected on the sewer side. Same thing with Oshtemo. So it might be something to start working with Kalamazoo Township and Pavilion to a lesser extent, K Township and Comstock, maybe have them start going through that process, so that when you do your work, that those numbers that you get, and it's a GIS project for the townships, that those numbers that you get from them are as accurate as can be, so that you don't have to ask for them and then have them start a project that could potentially delay your project. So that might be a good ask to them.
Yeah, that's a good count. Thanks, Tom.
That all sounds very good, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Next item, also from James, introducing, I think, is the Comstock Township PFAS area overview. Understanding is that PFAS was detected, I think it's the 33rd Street area. I can pick on that. Thirtieth. So this is, we don't have any action for this group today. We have PFAS detection just to let the UPC know what's going on with that. Yes.
Just, so what happened here is, the dot is a workers, some workers' residence. So it is you have to help me out, it's a public well, it's not an individual well. So if this was an individual well, nobody's testing it, you don't know about it. But because it's serving more than 15 people, more than 30 days a year, or 30, whatever the threshold is for a type 2A or something like that. They do have to do the testing for a public well, and that's how this popped up. Eagle has been doing more testing in the area to see what they find. There is a meeting scheduled someday in the future. I'm not sure if there's an actual schedule there. Indicated there will be a meeting to present this. And so that's where we're at. We're waiting to find out what they find.
Wellhead protection is near there.
So to the left, the northwest, that is station number
25.
25, Campbell Lake Station. And it comes close, the 10-year time of travel, looked at that yesterday. And it does sort of come down in there. You don't have, James, do you know that delineation line?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. I'll have to zoom into that.
I don't think it hits that parcel, but it's close.
Yeah, it doesn't hit that parcel. And I will share with everybody that we have never had any detections at 25. 25 is throughout its entire life has been non-detect. So, yeah, you kind of see it for those at the table, but that's the time of travels for the station itself. The smallest circle is the 1 year, then you get the 5 and the 10. And then North 30th is right here. H is across the top. And then East Main, I believe, is further down, much further down. So we're just coming to the top of this pink square there in terms of capture zone, but we've never had detections at that station.
Yeah, so it'll be very useful to understand what they find.
Yeah.
So it's in the very early stages of the
Yeah.
Eagle investigating what's going on and why.
Yep. And I called Scott Hess at Comstock and asked if he knew that, he didn't know that meeting had been scheduled yet. So I think they're still in the information gathering and analysis stage.
And that's like an agricultural,
Yeah, those are the bedding plant industry, so which Comstock is known for. All those are buildings that they put plants in.
and James, I don't know that you would be able to share it, but perhaps, just thinking about it, you have wells that are in an aquifer, but it's very possible this is at some other level where it wouldn't interplay, is that make sense?
Sure, I mean, it's very possible that these residential wells or even this type 2 well, I don't have any information on the well data, but quite often smaller capacity wells are not as deep. So it is possible these are much shallower wells. And to my knowledge, and I could be wrong on this, but there's not been like a major manufacturer in this area. There's no known, there wasn't like an automotive supplier here or something like that. From my recollection, this was all ag and kind of has always been ag based.
Now, the bedding plant is more industrial ag, but there's still, I'm not aware of why there would be PFAS there from that use. It's right now sort of a mystery.
And right now, the current water, public water is to the west, quite a distance, and
Yeah, so
then
if you-
to the east.
Correct, yeah, we've got the big inter-district transmission main on 33rd Street. It's a 24-inch pipe. And then we've got on East Main to the south, that main is getting extended east. There's schools done some construction, so that main is kind of moving eastward. And then on the north and H Avenue, that's actually where it comes out of the station. and then that kind of stops there. Long-term, like, it's not even shown on our capital plan right now, but probably, 11 years into the future, there would be a plan, probably first to loop East Main to that large interdistrict transmission, and then probably at some other future date, H Ave to that interdistrict transmission. Both H Ave and East Main have stubs from that large transmission main out into those streets so that future connection can be made, but it's quite a ways out in our plan. It's not anything that we're considering within the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Just a quick question, tangential. If we had to pick a number and say, our capital investment and what we're spending, do you think 10% is related now to PFAS?
Right now, if you took a right now snapshot, it's much greater than that, probably 70 or 90%, because we've got
Really?
about a $50 to $60 million project at 5 and 14 that could hit that bucket. And we've got a very large project in Richland Township of $40 million that would hit that bucket. So about $100 million right now is for PFAS.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty big chunk of our, 1 year. That's almost all of our 1 year. And it's a big chunk of our 5 year. I think, Jeff, you talked about $500 million in the next 5 years, so 20% of our 5-year plan is just PFAS.
It just happens to all be happening next year or whatever.
Yeah, it's happening, and I speak rather fluid about capital in terms of, we're working on it, but that's still, work's gonna extend probably 3 years. You see the money in this year, so there's.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of
Yeah.
funding that is grant funding, so that helps too.
That does help. Most all that PFAS dollars is coming to us in grant or coming to us within a loan portfolio that is very beneficial to the city. Low rate, 2%, long term, like 4 years, so that it's very soft on rate. So it really helps that we've got that support from the state.
Not to catastrophize, but I'll say one other thing. Just interesting over the course of time, we use one approach, lead service lines, which no one's thinking about much. And then obviously it becomes completely evident that that was a bad idea and we're spending a bunch of money replacing those. PFAS thing emerges, when did that happen?
2018,
2018, yeah.
August 28th, or July 28th, excuse me, 6:03.
And suddenly,
I know it well.
I know where I was that day.
suddenly now 78% of this year's budget and 20% over the 5 years, unimagined in 2017, I guess, we're gonna be spending all this money in our
Right.
budget, so it just takes it and shoves our focus. Are there other things out there that we just don't test for that, I know that's kind of a ridiculous question, because that's a big what if, but.
The answer is yes, but when's it gonna hit?
Yeah, I think this is a good point. I think that observation is very real to what we've been saying in terms of the regulatory landscape today is not comparable to what it was 10 or 15 years ago. So if you look at all the money we have spent and are spending and will spend on lead and PFAS, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that were never considered in the 2012 or 13, 14, 15 rates. I started as deputy director in 2015, and, we were just starting to open the door on lead. And I don't think we still, had that understanding of what that cost was. We didn't really understand that until 2017, when the city commission committed to that 20-year replacement schedule, and then PFAS, everything else. So, you blink your eye overnight, and as a water system, ratepayers have got a couple $100 million of things that we have to do. And it's not a choice. It's kind of your regulatory landscape requires it.
PFAS is known as an emerging contaminant. And the idea there is there are others contaminants that are out there that will emerge, partially because we can test. 10 years ago, you couldn't test to the level,
Yeah.
you'd have no idea that PFAS was there. But the testing is so accurate now, we go from 1 in a billion to 1 in a trillion.
Correct, 1 inch right now.
So that's part of it as well, we're getting better, we're understanding more that the stuff that we've used in the past is bad for us, and we're getting better at seeing that it's there. So,
One of the things too, we mentioned yesterday at EHAC, is that your normal septic tanks, what we put down in our septic tanks, shampoos, deodorants, body wash, all that stuff contains those particular chemicals. So how is that over time gonna affect the water table where there is no municipal water?
James mentioned 1860 something for the Kalamazoo system. We were just talking this morning. In 1854, this doctor in London figured out there were 500 people that died in 10 days from cholera. And he went out in this area and he went out and took the handle off the public well. So it goes way back.
Yeah.
I hadn't known that story. Next item is the 7C, the quarterly financial report, and Peter, I'll put this up on the screen, it's too small.
No, that's great. I was gonna ask you to do so, so thank you very much, Libby. So this is the first quarter of calendar year 2025 financial information. And the first page looks just like what we're looking at, and that is a summary of information provided by the city of both budgeted balances and actual balances for 2025. And I put the yellow numbers out there because they provide a summarization of the balances above, rather than trying to look at a individual line. I was looking more big picture, and I was looking at what are the city's water system operating expenses, or I categorized them as operating, and I said, okay, they're 16% of budget as of the end of the first quarter. Now, a couple observations I would have is, in January, bills are being received by the city that are not on this report. They're actually being pushed back into 2024. So I would expect that the expenses would be less than 25% because the bill for March will be in next month. And so I just looked big picture, okay, 16% of budget in operating expenses sounds appropriate. And I want to point out, this first page really feeds into all the other pages. We're just really comparing this data with what does last year's numbers look like as of March? What is last year's at a more summarized level look at the end of March, et cetera, et cetera. So the big things I would just wanted to point out is we're at 16% of expenses for operations, which is logical. You take a look at debt service, we're dead on 25% of debt service. City does a very good job of budgeting for debt because it's a known fixed commodity. We gotta pay X, Y, Z. The fact that we're at 25%, I'm somewhat surprised because principal payments are typically once a year. So likely they probably fall at maybe March and then 6 months later for the various bonds, and they pay principal just once a year and interest twice a year, but that's great. You know, we're not over 25%, and that's kind of what I'm looking for, or I was looking for. But I wanted to provide you with a summary that, rather than trying to delve into why is that line like this, just kind of a high level, take a look at some numbers. I take a look at capital, you can see we're at 15% of the budget, so projects are progressing. And that's a big picture look, it's just 25 budget, 25 actual. And then I put a percentage of where are we at as a percentage budget, and then I'm just looking at it at a more summarized level. These balances are the summarization of the balances before it. And I like to look at revenue just to see where we're at, so the next page is the detail of the revenue lines and what makes it up. And I do want to point out that the city is in the mode of preparing for their audit. And what happens is you have quarterly billings, so you bill in January, and likely all of that was for the year before. You bill in February, and maybe 2 months of that is for the year before, et cetera. So when we take a look at these numbers and at the budget, the revenues were lower than 25%. Well, that's because the city is in the process of moving those balances back to last year. And so these numbers would be adjusted. I know you had a question, Mayor, regarding the city's component, but I suspect that if we were to look at that at audit time, it would even be different from these numbers, because there was an adjustment when I was preparing these numbers. I brought up a number that looked out of line, and in fact, it had been adjusted like 3 days later for purposes of the audit. But just interesting, I wanted to point out, if you look 3 lines from the end, $1 million federal grant. I like that. So that's positive. Very helpful in financing the capital of the city or the regional system. And if you turn to the next page that follows, this is simply looking at the balances. We have 2024 and 2025, and you can see that there's generally an increase to 2025. Some of that's inflation, but I think the capital is underway. So capital's getting a jump. Projects have been, queued up. Now supplies are available, materials or what have you. So they're getting the jump on these substantial capital projects that we have. But I look at, for instance, if I just look at the operating component, it's really not up much at all. It's up $100,000, which is like 2% or something of that nature. I didn't calculate it. I should have. And then the last page. It's that summarization that looks like this, Libby.
Yes.
Oh, okay. When I looked, it was a different picture. And this is just those same expenses, so you can track these numbers to the very first page for 2025, and in the various categories of where things are being expended. So you can see we're up on capital, which is good. We want to improve the system, and it's getting improved. But when we take a look at like chemicals, 3% increase, or wages and benefits, 4.5% increase. And I don't know if the payroll accrual was posted for 2024 yet for purposes of your audit, and that'll shift things slightly. So I was looking at the big things. And the big things I saw was $1 million federal grant, a lot more capital, debt service is in line with where you think it should be, and the operating expenses were generally not like through the roof. It's capital that's driving this. So that was my take. All this information is available, and I can provide it to you. If you click on one, it'll show you 100 lines of wages, and if you want to get into that, you can. But thank you, James, for getting me the data, and hopefully this is beneficial. But it kind of just gives us a macro level look at how are things progressing, dollar-wise. And the audit does play in, so it'll shift things slightly.
I think that's extremely helpful. I really thank you for doing this. Otherwise, it's really kind of an eye glazer to try to get your head wrapped around what are we looking at comparing. So I really, really appreciate your time in this. I mean, there's timing issues, but does it mean something to look at utilities here and say, hey, that's up, close to 13%? Is that because utility costs are up? Is that because we're just using more? Is this some timing issues in there?
Right. No, I think that's a great question, and what I think we ought to do is take that as like a case study. So let's look at 6 months and see where we're at. If it's up 13% still, just because I'm not sure how the audit plays in, if everything's getting booked back.
Yeah.
But we're looking 24 to 25, and you're absolutely right. But again, I know, I understand the audit probably starts in May. And that's when the numbers are more solid for last year, which they're booking things back.
Yeah.
But let's look at that in June, and if it's up 14%, maybe we ought to take a look at some bills, or maybe you already know the answer to that. I do not.
I can't say if it's exactly at 12% per se, but it is up. Utility prices, what we pay for utilities continue to rise year after year after year. If we go back, I mean, it's a pretty consistent rise that you see. Incremental increases on our rate. Just about
Electricity primarily.
Correct, primary electricity. There is a natural gas component to that.
And if I double clicked on that, I could give you that breakdown. So I will for the next meeting. It'll show you every account that has a utility and what it was last year and this year, and maybe that'll lead to something. So I can do that for the next meeting, and then if we want to do something like in 6 months too. But I think that's a great question, because I look at a lot of these things too. And I had a question about some things for James, and I was like, what's this and what's this? And he comes back, almost immediately and says, okay, this is what, what's going on. So if you have a question, I'll give you the breakdown for the next meeting for sure.
Any other questions or comments? The next item is professional services and compensation discussion. Why don't we start with the compensation question?
Okay. Okay. It was just thanks, Libby. Just something that I had been thinking about actually for a little while here, is that most of us that attend this meeting either are here as part of our jobs, or being compensated for that, or might be billing for our time through our professional, relationship with this. But there'll be some handful of folks that don't get compensated at all. It's not part of the job. So I just thinking, should we have a stipend policy for people that fall in that category that aren't otherwise being compensated for their time? So that's what I'm proposing. And at this point, that might be only one person on this board. I don't know.
I think that's correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I don't know if people are just open to that idea, but just seemed kind of unfair to me when I look around the table.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think in looking at that, the water services agreement has the townships appointing, city appointing at least one each technical person. And I think that person, the other person on this board, falls into that category.
It specifically says related to that category.
Yeah, so that,
Which is, it says engineer, accountant, planner, water expert, or et cetera, et cetera.
and, and Mr. Escamilla was the former technical person from the city. So I think this is a replacement for that, so there should be some compensation there. That's my feeling. And then maybe there could be some discussion with James in terms of how that could happen, or the amount derived before next meeting or something.
Okay.
And then we do have a bylaw that actually specifically calls out how we do the professional compensation. If we decide we want to do that, and whatever the number is, we should probably make an amendment to that, right?
Okay.
So whoever's the keeper of the bylaws.
I think they're on the city's website.
Okay. No, but that was one of the first things we.
Yeah, that's good. So
Okay.
why don't I
So-
get with James and
Okay,
keep,
that sounds great.
maybe we'll do
Appreciate
some email sharing with you and,
Okay.
thank you. And then we have invoice approvals. There are 3 invoices.
I'll take care of the other part of this work then. So I move approval of payment of 2 invoices from Hefner Group, invoice number 1035 and 1031.
I'll support it.
There's a motion by David Anderson and a second by John Crum to approve the Hefner Group 2 invoices in the packet today. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain?
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0 and 1 absent,
I move
and 1
approval.
abstention.
Move approval of Prine and Newhoff invoice number 87621 and payment thereof.
I'll support.
There's a motion by David Anderson, supported by John Crum, to approve the Prine Newhoff invoice as described. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain?
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, 1 abstention, and 1 absent. And then on to the agenda item that was added at the top of the meeting, the consideration of an update to the Appendix D fees based on the annual review of those costs. And there's information that was in the final packet distributed, which I'll share on the screen, and while I'm doing that,
And this is something is updated every year, right?
Correct.
Do we need a motion to approve of that? Or?
yes,
I move approval of the updated reimbursement cost schedule.
Support?
there's a motion by David Anderson and a second by Tom Wheat to approve the updated Schedule D fee, Appendix D schedule, fee schedule, Appendix D fee schedule, as proposed.
Say that fast.
Yes. Any discussion? This is part of it. Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Committee member, alternate attendee guest comments, item number 8. Start with
I guess just from my perspective, these kind of discussions don't happen anyplace else. Maybe they're happening in some other quiet room and I just don't happen to be there, but I just think it's really important that at least some public place we're having these kinds of discussions. It's really helpful for me. I don't know if it's only the total, watch public meetings nerd who can't sleep at 2 a.m, who might actually look at these things when they're out there, but I still think they're generally very informative, and I hope that if people do care about our water system, this would be a place where they could look to get some questions answered and hear some of the thoughtful conversations that people are having, grappling with how to manage it. So anyway, I appreciate everyone's participation and everyone that makes sure these are possible in public, so.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Nothing?
I'm good.
No, thank you.
Welcome back, Jeff.
Thank you.
Let's see, Anna?
It was John Snow, who was a physician in England, who figured out that cholera was coming from the river. And he was considered the father of epidemiology and also modern statistics. So he mapped where people were getting sick and dying. People who went from the city to the country recovered. People who didn't, unfortunately, did not. And then he was so convinced of, what he had discovered, he took the handle off the pump of the well, and the epidemic subsided. So,
How
your
did you
history
know-
lesson.
How did you know all that?
I'm a, somewhere
I love it.
along the way.
There's actually a good book on it
Yeah,
that I
there's-
read couple years ago, that's exactly what you said, so
Yes.
good job.
Thank you, thank you.
It's
It's
true.
the academic in me.
I
Love it.
Bear, anything?
No, thank you.
Nope.
Mark,
Good job. Thank you again, everyone.
Yes.
any comment from online? Oh, I'm sorry. Not hearing anything from online, so our next meeting is May 8th here at Oshtemo Township Hall. And we have exhausted the agenda and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good deal.